Hey, what's going on? Recently, I saw a comment on one of my posts from my buddy Corellians, and he said, I quote, "A person's ability to write is perhaps determined by the expression of the FOXP2 gene. If you take rats and replace their FOXP2 gene and replace it, sick, with a human's, then you get more and more complex vocalizations. What's my point? My point is this: some people can write and some can't, and it's probably genetic." And thanks, Corellians. That got me thinking. And no, I don't find your reference to a mechanistic animal study particularly convincing, but I do think there's growing scientific consensus among researchers that many outcomes in life are critically influenced by our genetics. I'll put some of the studies I referenced below, but for example, we can kick it off with a 2018 study by Salvatori and colleagues published in Psychological Science. The study examines data from a Swedish adoption database of about 20,000 adoptees and concludes adoptees resembled their biological parents rather than their adoptive parents in their history of divorce, and that the inheritability of divorce is 0.13, meaning in this cohort, about 13% of children followed the marital status of their biological parents. So that's not 50%, but that's still a pretty surprising finding, and it's a pretty big association there. Okay, so that's family status. Now let's look at money. Let's quote a 2019 study by Heitinen and colleagues in the Journal of Economic Inequality. Using 20 years of earnings data on Finnish twins, we find that about 40% of the variance of women's and a little more than half of men's lifetime labor earnings are linked to genetic factors. The contribution of shared environment is negligible. Now, sure, this is Finland, not America, which is fundamentally a different society on many levels. I should know my father is Swedish. I have many relatives, extended family in Sweden. I've been to Sweden many times. Totally fucking different culture. But nevertheless, all things being equal, scientists are saying that genetics play an absolutely massive role in what happens over our lifetimes. Now, sure, I just cherry-picked two random studies that fit my thesis, which is shitty science, but I'm not a scientist, obviously. So allow me to defer to one. Catherine Page Harden is a professor of clinical psychology at UT Austin and the recipient of the Award for Distinguished Scientific Early Career Contributions from the American Psychological Association. In other words, she's wicked smart. She wrote a book called The Genetic Lottery: Why DNA Matters for Social Equity, and is interested in how we can better deploy resources to create positive outcomes for everyone, regardless of where they're at. Now, I'm not going to harp on this third rail of politics, but here's what she said about educational outcomes. Quote, 40% of the variation in educational attainment is due to genes. 40% of the variation due to genes. Wow. Now, she's careful to qualify that educational attainment is not equivalent to intelligence, and that this could be because the way school itself is structured, that we as a society have built it this way, and not because our genes make us smart or dumb. And that's a very important distinction. So now let's zoom back to Corellians, who has boldly stated that, quote, some people can write and some can't, and it's probably genetic. Now, to me, personally, poetry feels less genetic than school achievement. Feels like Fame is a fickle, random beast, more random than standardized tests. But I have no evidence for this, just conjecture. But to be fair, Corellians doesn't really have any evidence besides his mechanistic animal study. I do have an anecdote for you. Yeats was an art school dropout. He tried several times to learn French and couldn't hack it. He just wasn't a good student. He was objectively kind of a bad student. He didn't have the FOXP2 gene. Yet, Yeats has given us one of many of the finest poems of the English language. So, setting aside anecdote, sure, hypothetically, let's give it to Corellians, hypothetically, let's say success in poetry is just massively genetic. And for the sake of argument, let's go as high as 90%. But just like in school, you still got to show up, you still got to do the work, you still got to raise your hand, you still got to take the exams. Even if you're such a genius that this is just like going through the motions, I know I'm saying the obvious, but that's kind of what success requires. It's no different in poetry. You still got to write, you still got to revise, you still got to submit, you still got to eat rejections and make connections. You got to hustle. And successful poets hustle a lot. For some, success comes easy, and for others, surely success comes harder, if at all. There are legions of very talented, hardworking poets with little to show for it. But there are many, many more so-called poets who pen some interesting rhymes when fancy strikes, but have zero game and zero work ethic. And then they have the audacity to come whine, DM me and about how nobody has discovered them yet. These losers, and I'm speaking to you, losers, haven't figured out a great mystical truth. The universe doesn't owe you anything. And I've seen firsthand in my time teaching workshops that people can get better who put in the work. Anybody can get better who puts in the work. Now, I have no idea if that means that these people who are getting better were just predisposed to do the work in the first place. But I can tell you it's 100% true that people who don't work don't get any better. So, no, I can't tell if the reason why people stay bad is because they're stupid or lazy. But from where I sit, it smells a lot like lazy. If I'm at the gym every Tuesday and keep seeing the same seriously overweight guy hauling ass up the Stairmaster like a cardiac death wish, I don't think to myself, oh man, that guy lost the genetic lottery. I think, wow, there's a guy doing something every day to make himself better. He knows he's not going to make the pros. He knows he's never going to be a fitness model. He's just trying to make economy on JetBlue. But he still has the heart of a champion. He can show up, work hard, and get better every day. He can beat his yesterday self. And we should all admire his work ethic. We should all admire people like him who are trying. I don't care if your poetry is a mess. If you can't write with consistent tenses. If you fuck up your punctuation, if you don't know a dactyl from a diphthong, I don't fucking care. But I do care if you like it that way and you're proud of it. Why should I admire a lazy poet, even a brilliant one? A poet manqué who refuses to learn from mistakes, revise, take input, and learn the trade? Man, if you have the gift and you're pissing it away, God, I am going to look down on you. Everyone has potential. Every single one of us. As for Corellians, well, my friend, all this achievement and stuff in life probably is more preordained than anybody on either side of the political spectrum would care to admit. It is uncomfortable. But taking an even bigger step back, man, we got to stop thinking about this stuff as a zero-sum game, where if I lose, they might win, or if they win, that's less for me. We collectively shape what we want this thing to be by helping one another improve, by being open and honest, by creating room for people, for anybody who's willing to do the work. Because poetry, unlike so many other things, is a created world. And the value of its products are in a very real and very wonderful sense debatable. We create the value system that we use to select what's worth keeping. And this value system says as much about us, if not more, than the poems themselves. We get the poems we as a society deserve. So let's kick your weak stuff and my weak stuff to the curb. Let's celebrate the good shit, irrespective of who wrote it and whether it fits our agendas. Let's taste greatness together. Thank you.